I don't have to ask you to raise your hands for this question. How many of you, don't raise your hand because this is easy. This is a lob, okay? We've all been disappointed by someone. Agreed? I mean, that's an easy one. I want to talk about that this morning. What do you do when you're disappointed by someone? The first people that you generally get disappointed with is someone in your family. Someone close to you that shouldn't be disappointing you, but they did. And then as you get older, you get disappointed with someone that was your friend that you thought they'll never do this, they'll never do that, and then they disappoint you. And then a coworker, a boss, someone in school, your neighbor, people that you thought they'll never do something to hurt me or disappoint me. And then, maybe you get married and it's your partner and you just keep on going. And through life's circumstances, we have this kind of a mountain of buildup of people that disappoint us, right? We feel like Charlie Brown with Lucy. Do you remember this? For years, he went to kick the football. And it was a series of times where he'd go to kick, and she was distracted, or she would pull the ball away, or whatever. She didn't want Chuck to get dirty. Whatever it was, and here he goes to kick, and then the next thing you know, he's up in the air, and he's on the ground, and he's like, And so I did a little research, and come to find out there was one time, I forget what year it was, that she actually did follow through and hold the ball. Anybody know what year that was? I don't know. It was a long time ago. Anyway, but here's the reality. Even though she did once, all the other times will leave a scar in his heart that I don't think I can trust her. I'm disappointed with my friend who says that she likes me. After many disappointments, here's what happens. We revert to a couple things. One is we revert to isolation. You understand what that is, right? We have a plastic face on the front of us where we're isolated from everyone else, from true, genuine, real relationships. And what we do within that is we create this vacuum that kind of spawns out into this loneliness. Loneliness today is I would say it's a pandemic that's happening in our hearts. They did some research, and I think it was 74%, if I remember the number correctly, 74% of people in their 20s would say that they are very lonely. That next generation is saying they're extremely lonely. However, it's fascinating that they have TikTok, they have Facebook, that's for the old people anyway, and Snapchat. Do they still use Snapchat? I don't know. Instagram? Okay, we still use Instagram. I'm so, not into social media. We have all these platforms, and it's the gods of relationship online that have failed this generation. Because it's not helping to make the loneliness go away. Even though you're connected to 553 people. It's interesting. So we revert to isolation, which spurs out into loneliness, where you kind of are like, I just feel alone all the time. I don't know what to do with these feelings. I'm trying to have a relationship, but to be honest with you, I don't really trust you because they hurt me. I have a life filled with disappointments, and so therefore you probably will disappoint me as well. Or here's the second one. The second one is relational perfectionism is what I call it. You know what relational perfectionism is, right? I'll only hang out with you if you're perfect. If you get to this level, then I'll hang out with you. We can have a relationship. And so we kind of have this striving for relationships that has to be at this level alone. Why? Because what we've done is we've built a safety net around our lives and our hearts so that we cannot get hurt. And the only people I'll let into my life are the people that I have deemed in my perfectionistic level of relationships as people that will probably, most likely, 99.9% sure they won't disappoint me. Problem is, we're all human. What did Jesus do with this? Was Jesus ever disappointed with people? I want to dive into this today because I want us to grab onto this. One of the things I believe that will hold us back spiritually and hold us back in our church from being who God called us to be is trust. When we choose to stop trusting everyone, and I hear this all the time, when we choose to stop trusting everyone, we will in turn stop trusting God. And in turn, our faith will be null and void because we don't operate on faith any longer. We operate on what we deem to be right in our own mind and heart. That's not faith. So how do we deal with it? I want us to deal with this in the way that Jesus did, not in the way that I think we should. I want to deal with it in the way that Jesus did and work through this. So here's what happens in Jesus' life. I'll give you the background to this, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, and then I want to go off and push a little bit deeper into some things that Jesus did. Jesus developed a group of best friends. They did life together. Think about this. They went through all kinds of things together. They had a great time with walking through this town and the other. They journeyed together. They vacationed together. Jesus did all kinds of miracles while they watched and healed people that were sick, that were blind, that couldn't walk, and even healed the dead, raised the dead to life. And there's some historical accuracy and proof to all these things that are happening in Jesus' life. So his friends, the disciples, Peter, James, John, Nathaniel, and all those hung out with him. They became best of friends and experienced all kinds of things together. One of the things in my past that helped me to bring people together in ministry is going on missions trips. And I'd like for us to get back to doing mission trips here soon. But going on a mission trip or going on a camp thing, Caleb, what you just got to do over the summer, going away for that season with people, you get to experience all kinds of different things with different people. And in those experiences where you get to see God working, you're like, wow, this is great. And you get to collaborate and enjoy that together. Well, Jesus did that firsthand with his disciples, with his friends that became best friends. So you got a dozen of these guys that are best buds with Jesus. They're walking around and doing life together. And one year, just like every year, they're celebrating the Passover, which they did every year. So in this celebration of the Passover, they get together. It's a Jewish holiday, so it's an annual thing that they're supposed to do. They got together, and we refer to this as the Last Supper because this is the last time that they celebrate this before Jesus dies. So there they are together, hanging out like any other time. It's holiday time. Think about it, Christmas for us, because this is probably the tradition that we kind of get together and have family and friends, and you're having a great time, and you're doing the things that you traditionally do, and you're having just a time with your best of friends, your family, people you love mostly, and there you are together. Here's Jesus with his 12 closest friends in a room together, sitting around a table having a great conversation. But Jesus turns the page on the conversation and makes it weird. He has a knack for this, right? And here's what he does. He washes the disciples' feet. We talked about this recently, where he washed the disciples' feet, and they're like, what's going on? This is totally weird. We can't do this. And Peter speaks up, Jesus, you really shouldn't be doing this. This is below your pay grade. You should. And he says, if you don't let me do this, you can't have any part of me. And he says, well, give me a bath then. And Jesus is like, you're not even getting the point, right? Then after that, Jesus is speaking to them, and in the Gospels, each of them records something different as to what's being said. It's fascinating. In Matthew 26:21, Jesus says this statement. He says, truly, I will say to you, one of you will betray me. Now, raise of hands. How many of you understand what it is to be betrayed? Okay, put your hands up again. How many of you would say it hurts when you're betrayed? That's easy, right? Of course. When is Jesus speaking this? Prior to the betrayal. It's I'm gearing up for pain here. I'm gearing up for hurt. By the way, I'm letting you know ahead of time, one of you that's sitting in this room around me, and you're all kind of hanging out, you're reclining next to me, we're having this intimate conversation, intimate time together, and one of you is going to do major damage by betraying me. And they all kind of looked around and said, me? Is it me? Is it me? Is it me? Mark 14:27, Jesus says this. He says, you will all fall away. He says that to his best friends. They've been hanging out, doing life together, and he says to them very clearly ahead of time, before it's about to happen, you're all leaving me. You're all going to desert me. This word, it's a divorcement. You will all divorce yourself from me. If you're in Jesus' mind and heart, do you see what he's gearing himself up for? I'm about to go through excruciating pain by having my best and closest friends betray, hurt me, and do damage to me like you've experienced, but this is worse because you'll all do it. Then all the Gospels is fascinating. They record this, that Jesus addresses Peter, because Peter says, I'll never do this. I'll die for you. Honest, Jesus, you know me. I'm your best bud. We do everything together. I would never, ever, ever. You got it wrong. And he says this. It's a funny conversation because he says, look, those losers over there, they'll probably deny, you're right. Bunch of, you know how they are. They're kind of fickle. Not me, Lord. I won't do it. I will not deny you. That's not going to happen. I'll die for you if I have to. That's this conversation. He's saying that to Jesus. And what does Jesus say back? He says, Peter, you're a loser too. No, he didn't say that. That's my own version, right? Because I would say that. He says, Peter, you're going to deny me too. Guess what, bud? Not once, but 3 times. And then he says this. Satan has requested you, Peter. Satan has a target on your heart. You ever feel like Satan has a target on your life? Jesus says it about Peter. Satan has requested you. But I'm praying that won't happen. It's a sobering conversation. This is the Christmas party. This is the friends getting together and having a good time. And Jesus turns the page and says, guys, listen, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be bad. You'll betray me. All of you will. And Peter, you're going to do the worst. So they leave the table and they go for a walk. And while they're going for a walk, if you follow the book, the Gospel of John, from John chapter around 14 and following, it's for several chapters, he is actually recording the conversation that he is having with the disciples. And it's a fascinating conversation. It's like theology in depth. The vine and the branches is in there, and he's having this amazing conversation as they're walking. And they get to this place of Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane, and he gets to this place, and he says to them, and this is Matthew chapter 26, if you want to turn there in your Bibles with me. I'm just going to highlight several verses here, and this will be our central theme this morning, Matthew chapter 26. In verse 36, he says, then Jesus went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. Jesus is saying clearly, I need to go over and I need to spend some time alone praying. This is my time just to pray. We don't talk about prayer enough in our lives, I don't think. We should be consistently and constantly praying. And there's seasons where we need to get alone to pray. Here, Jesus gets alone to pray, knowing what's about to happen. And they're just walking. They're just in this place where it was a common thing for them to do and be in this place. So he goes a little further. It says in the next few verses, it says in verse 37, and talking with him, Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. So he takes them aside, and there they are alone, just the four of them. And he says to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Okay, time out. Can we be real for a moment? Be totally, like, genuinely real. When you just read that, that sounded like Scripture, and it sounds like something we can separate ourselves from. Now, if your best friend leaned into you, just pulled up next to you and said, bud, my heart is in so much pain, sorrow. It's so bad, I feel like I'm just going to die right here. How do you respond? Sounds like you need to call somebody, Jesus. I don't know what to tell you. Is that how you respond? You put your arm around him? You say, hey, listen, we're best friends. You can share anything. You can tell me anything. What do you need, man? And Jesus' response in that next verse, while he says he's sorrowful, he's exceedingly, I just have so much pain in here, he's saying. And then he says to them this, one command, one request, one thing he's asking them to do is one thing. You ready? Watch. Watch with me. Watch with me. We have a corgi, a dog. His name is Trevi. If I were to walk Trevi out on Evesham, should I have a leash on Trevi or not? How many would say yes? How many would say no? Now, if it was a cat, that'd be a different Anyway, I'm kidding. That's terrible. That's really mean. I would never do something like that. But if I let my son Ethan take Trevi for a walk and I said to him, pay attention, son. You watch. You walk down Evesham, you make sure you're paying attention. You have a leash on him, and you watch him because you don't know what's going to happen. Now, all of a sudden, he has this understanding that he has to be on guard and watching. There's something going on here. If I said to my family before we went to bed, I said to them, hey, listen, I've got a really bad feeling about tonight. We need to be watching everything that's going on here. It would all of a sudden change the whole mood, wouldn't it? The thoughts and the ideas of what's about to happen. And that's what Jesus is doing. He's saying, watch. I'm extreme. My sorrow, it's just welling up in me. I'm in so much pain here. Guys, you're my best friends. I just need you to watch. So Jesus goes away and he prays alone from them, a stone's throw away. It says in verse 39, and going a little further, he fell on his face and he prayed, saying this, and this is such a deep theological prayer. My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. What he's saying there is if there's any other way, if you can redeem mankind through any other means, if they can be good enough to go to heaven and have a relationship with you, then I don't want to do this. If they can pay money to get into heaven, I don't want to do this. If there's any other way, if it's all roads lead to heaven and everybody's going to end up there anyway, I don't want to do this. He's taking the whole idea of all these different religions being right, and he's saying they're all wrong. John 14, Jesus says to them, I am the way, the only way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And what he's saying here is the same thing at a kind of a parenthetical way, where he's saying it back here and he's saying it again in his prayer to God. If there's any other way, if that statement is not true, that I'm the way, the truth, and the life, if they can get to you through any other means, then please don't let me go through this pain. This verse drives me. And I know it drives many of you. As we sat in men's Bible study on Thursday night, we had men's group and we're at Philly Diner. One of the guys was sharing how it keeps him up at night and how his family doesn't know Jesus, and it breaks his heart, and he's trying to figure out how he can lead them to understand Jesus. And he tells them, and some of his family, his friends, his neighbors just look at him and kind of like laugh and walk away. You understand this pain, yes? And that's where Jesus is at. If there's any other way, I don't want this for me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. So verse 40 finishes his prayer time. He comes to his disciples and he found them sleeping. Okay, if you're on watch, can you be on watch and sleep at the same time? If you're the best friend of Jesus and you just fell asleep when he said, I need you guys now. Perhaps the only time he said to them, I need you. How do you feel if you're Jesus? Yeah, betrayed. You're hurt. You're in pain. Really? And he says to Peter, verse 40, so could you not watch with me 1 hour? I was only gone for a little bit. Really? He says, watch and pray that you may not enter temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. You need to stay awake, guys. So again, the second time in verse 42, he went away to pray, and he says, my Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. He is reconciling his heart, his mind, and he's deliberately going in the direction his Father is leading and making sure this is exactly where he needs to go. Turns around, verse 43, and he came again, he found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. They couldn't do it twice. He confronted them. He let them know the expectation ahead of time. And he said, hey, listen, here's all I'm expecting. Here's all I'm asking, is I'm asking that you just stay awake and pray. He trusted them, and they didn't do it. The simplest, the easiest of thing, they didn't do it. They fell asleep not once but twice. What would you say? Listen, those of us that have kind of a more colorful way of expressing ourselves might have a very colorful way of expressing ourselves, because you'd be sorely disappointed at this point, yes? Verse 45 says, then he came to the disciples and said to them, so he goes over, and if it were me, listen, I'm just being a little human here. If it were me, I would do what I did at a summer camp I did years ago with the teens. I came in, and I had to, no, it was a mission trip, I'm sorry. I had to wake everybody up from the mission trip, and here's what I got. I got a trumpet out at like 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, it was great. I was that guy. And I started playing the trumpet because I've played the trumpet before. So I start playing the trumpet, and they're like, what are you doing? You know, that would be exactly the way I would wake the disciples up. I would have a trumpet blaring in their ear, right next to Peter's ear. You know, and it would be, anyway, okay, Jesus didn't do that. Not that they record for us, but it would have been hilarious. Anyway. And he says to them, he says, sleep and take your rest later on. See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is right here, he's at hand. And while he was speaking, verse 47, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer, no longer Judas, now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, the one that I kiss is the man. Seize him. And he came up to Jesus at once and said, greetings, Rabbi. this smirk and smile on his face, and he kissed him. And Jesus said, "Friend," which is the oddest greeting. Friend, I would say betrayer. Friend, do what you came to do. Then they came up, they laid their hands on Jesus, they seized him, and behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew a sword to struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said, "Put your sword away. It's not what we're doing here, guys." And they arrest Jesus. That's not the end, because the end of this whole segment in verse 56, it says this. Matthew records of himself and the others. Then all the disciples, all 12 of the disciples, all of Jesus' best friends, that just a few hours ago, literally just at dinner time, it was that short ago, just a little while ago, all of those that said, we're not going to, I don't know who's going to betray you, but that's weird, and I would never do that. And Peter, there's no way, that's not going to happen. All of those guys. We die with you, all of those. It says, they left him and fled. They were gone. How do you feel if you're Jesus? Now you're alone. All your best friends are gone. It's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. The religious people, they turned on Jesus. The ones that knew the scriptures and that Jesus had fulfilled all of the scriptures, identifying himself as the Messiah, they rejected Jesus. They wanted him gone. His friends rejected him. His family had rejected him previously. That was well known. And now, on earth, he is all alone. See, here's my point. I want to prove the point to you that sometimes we look at Jesus and he's at this level where he didn't experience any pain except for the cross. And that was kind of tough. That was like falling off your bike and scraping your knee. That was, it's a rough day, but you got over it. No, it wasn't. This is the worst pain ever. And it started back here at dinner. That he said ahead of time, you're all going to leave me and reject me, and Peter, you're going to do the worst. And he walked into this, and he experienced disappointment at a level that none of us can even understand, because while he's on the cross, he even said about the Father, where are you at? I'm alone, bearing all of the sin of the world on him in that moment, that the Father, God the Father, it's the time the Trinity is totally separated, and I don't understand that theologically, but I understand that in what he's saying. It's the Father had to separate himself because he's carrying all the sin of the world in that moment in time. My God, why have you, of all, forsaken me? I can't even pray right now. He understood pain and disappointment. He knew that he would be disappointed in people. He knew that, and he confronted them when they did. But here's my point. To pull it all together, I just want to prove to you the point. Well, number one, what Jesus experienced is like what we've experienced, but worse. Okay? What he did about it is what's important. Because what we often do is what I've already said. We get into this relational perfectionism, or we do this isolation thing, and we try to vet and push people away and do all this stuff to try to prove and it's protect ourselves, really? And here's what Jesus did. And listen, I'm not, just so you know, I have my own things I do too, within both of those. I can share that openly because I'm the same. It's a struggle to trust. It's hard. Two things. If you want to rebuild trust, it takes two things. Trust cannot be rebuilt without truth. Trust cannot be rebuilt without truth. It takes actually making a statement of truth to that person. Here's what Jesus did. He expressed his expectations ahead of time. So truth is, expectations must be stated up here. Some of those are general expectations. A general expectation is, you're not going to lie to me. Yes? General expectation. You're not cheating on me. We're married. That's just part of the general. I didn't have to have you sign a paper that you're not going to cheat on me. That's like normal expectations. It doesn't even need to be stated. But then there's other expectations. Watch and like pray. There's my expectation. Jesus had to them. So you state your expectations. Number one, it has to be clear and understandable. But then secondly, if it's broken and if it's hurt, if you experience a disappointment, you push back, and you only can restore that trust by rebuilding it with truth. It must actually be restated back. Sometimes what we think is we can just be passive and say, oh, well, I guess they missed that one, and I'll rebuild trust by not stating anything. You can't. You literally, reconciliation cannot happen until truth is met in the middle, where it pulls you together, the truth of, yes, you failed that expectation, and on this side is, yes, I did fail that expectation. Peter later on actually acknowledged this and said, I am a failure. I can't go anywhere. And Jesus, you know this about me. You know I love you, sort of, kind of, maybe, could be. I failed horribly. And Jesus restores him. That's truth in reconciliation. So when someone fails you, you express the truth of your hurt when they fall, when they fail. Trust cannot be rebuilt without truth. Second thing is, trust can't be rebuilt without grace. So first, if you're hurt, then you express it the best you can with them. This really hurt me. And I understand that people will even do more damage and harm there and say, I don't care about you. You're just too soft. I don't care. This is whatever. And it's your problem, not my problem. And yes, that even gets worse. So then the second aspect of trust is trust can't be rebuilt without grace. As we say all the time, we are a work in progress. And so to be a work in progress recognizes that you're a work in progress as well. That you do things wrong too. So because we're a work in progress, we must treat others with that idea and extend grace consistently. If grace is not in the middle of our relationships will die. The reason why marriages get sour over time is because grace fails to extend itself past the point where they feel like grace should extend itself. The reason why relationships only last typically around 7 years, that's a general statistic, they last around 7 years, it's because you could be best friends here, but over time you get to see the real person, and you get tired of the little annoyances of that person, and you stop extending grace. Because you discover after first few months and years, oh wow, they're messed up. I can't believe it. I didn't think they were. But their breath stinks. Their jokes are corny. I used to laugh at those. You know? Grace gets extended over time, and that's what keeps the relationships growing. You see, when we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we do this because it reminds us of these things. See, look, this table, do this in remembrance of me. Do you see, this was the beginning of the disappointments with his best friends. And he knew it. He knew they were going to hurt him. He said, okay. He followed the Father, and he freely gave his life for you and for me. So here's my question for us. As we go to this table, as we go to partake of this, and the elements aren't out here yet, but they will be shortly, right? As we prepare this, I'm going to ask that you prepare your heart. And here's the big question. I'm not trying to just give a guilt trip. I want this to be truth. If God could extend grace to you, just be honest about yourself. I know you think you're the best person ever that's lived on this planet, sort of. I was listening to a Taylor Swift song yesterday. I'm sorry. It just randomly came up on some of you are like, really? It just came up on the radio. So I'm hearing this, and I'm like, oh, that's terrible. It's the first time I've ever heard this song. And you might know it. It's called The Anti-Hero. And she's talking, I'm listening to this, and she's talking about looking in the mirror, and she sees herself as a hero and the anti-hero. Really interesting stuff. Sometimes when you look in the mirror, especially over time, you start to see, man, what I said, I can be a real jerk. What I do sometimes, I'm so lousy at this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, it's true. You're a work in progress. We all are. So we extend grace because grace has been extended to us through the Lord Jesus Christ. And we keep that going. Is there anyone that you need to actually rebuild trust with? Is there anyone that you need to extend grace to? And part of grace is to speak the truth. You hurt me. And part of grace is they may not say they're sorry. And part of grace is to remain in the position of reconciliation even if they cuss you out in that moment. Because that's what Peter did. And that's what the disciples did. And Jesus remained in the position of reconciliation where he stayed open and willing to reconcile those relationships. He didn't move. And so following God by faith is I recognize what God's done for me, and so I'll do that with others. Is it hard? Oh, yes. It hurts. But we've all done it. And so before we partake, here's what I'm going to ask. That we just pause and pray. And look at our own heart. Don't look at, hey, they did this to me. No. Just look at your own heart. And Lord, who do I need to extend grace to? And while you're preparing your heart, we'll prepare the table. Let's bow and pray.